In just a second, I'm going to break down for you guys what the actual history of the Second Amendment is. And spoiler alert, it's nothing like you think it is. In fact, even Democrats and progressives, even people who are in favor of some form of moderate gun reform, even they don't know what the actual history of the Second Amendment is. So I'll break that down for you in a second. But first, let me give you some other specifics and give you some numbers about the extent of gun violence in the United States of America right now. So today, we had yet another shooting. This time, it was at an Oregon school. There's one person dead, and the shooter is dead as well. This is on top of the terrorist shooting incident in Las Vegas on Sunday, where 3 people were killed, including 2 police officers. So let's look at the full scope of the problem of gun violence in America. Let me give you some stunning information here. So first and foremost, we all remember that on December 14th, 2012, Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 children and 6 staff members at the Sandy Hook School in Newtown, Connecticut. So since then, so it's been about a year and a half now, since then, how many school shootings have we had in the United States of America? 74. Isn't that amazing, man? 74 school shootings since just Newtown. And I bet you haven't even heard of most of them. Maybe you heard of like 2 or 3 of them at most. There's been 74 school shootings. Okay, how many people in total have died because of guns in America since Newtown? Okay, and this is everything. This includes suicides, homicides, mass shootings, accidents, everything put together. According to Slate, quote, as of today, so June 10th, 2014, roughly 51,158 people have died from guns in the U.S. since the Newtown shootings. That is fucking ridiculous. Over 51,000 deaths. That's more than the number of people that died in the Revolutionary War. That's more than the number of people, that's more than double the number of American soldiers that died in Afghanistan. That gives you a sense of just how bad the situation is. In fact, there were news reports about how the violence in Iraq is getting out of control. You know how many people died? About 10,000. 51,000 in the United States of America in about a year and a half period. Now, I want everybody to listen very carefully because we need to address the arguments that are against any kind of moderate gun reform. So the so-called pro-gun rights side of the argument, in reality, they're gun anarchists. But they say this. They say, well, you have to understand that more guns equals more peace. And the reason why that is because most people are good. Okay, so since most people are good, if you give them guns, then the good people with the guns outnumber the bad people with the guns. So therefore, it keeps this level of balance. And the good people with the guns keep the bad people with the guns in check. So it's kind of like game theory on an individual level. That's their argument. And look, to be fair and to be clear, certainly from a theoretical perspective, it makes sense. From a philosophical perspective, you can see where they're coming from. You go, oh, okay, that's a respectable position. Now, what's the reality of the situation? Well, the other possible belief system is the more progressive belief system that more guns equals more gun violence. So here's the fact that demolishes the entire debate. It just blows it up, right? In the United States of America today, we have about 300 million guns in circulation. Some of the estimates are a little lower. Some of the estimates go as high as 320 million guns, okay? So in the U.S., we have 300 million guns. So if the conservative argument were true, and the gun rights / gun anarchists were right, if that were true, the United States of America would by far be the safest modern nation in the world. And not only are we not, we are one of the least safe in the world. Okay? So, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. We have the most guns. We have the most guns, and we don't have the most peace. In fact, we have wanton gun violence. So a Harvard study on gun violence looked into this. In fact, it was a meta-analysis from a few years ago. They said, quote, case control studies, ecological time series, and cross-sectional studies indicate that in homes, cities, states, and regions in the U.S. where there are more guns, both men and women are at higher risk for homicide, particularly firearm homicide. The conclusion of the study is that more guns equals more gun violence. So again, that pro-gun rights theory is just incorrect. It's just factually incorrect according to the empirical data. And also, I mean, there's so many other, examples of this. So Alaska has the highest amount of gun violence per capita, okay? They have incredibly lax gun laws. That shouldn't come as a surprise to people. Now, let's put aside all this and get into the legal aspect and the constitutional aspect of the conversation and bust up the terrible misunderstandings of the Second Amendment. Again, from everybody. It's not just the right-wingers that get this wrong. It's the left-wingers, too, who largely bought into the bogus framing of the right. So first of all, what is the literal text of the Second Amendment? Quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, just on a surface level, let's break this down. Number one, they're talking about a militia, not individuals. If they wanted to say individuals have a right to bear arms, they would have said individuals have a right to bear arms. They're talking about militias. Number two, the word regulated is right in the amendment. I find it hilarious that conservatives argue, well, you're not allowed to regulate guns because of the Second Amendment. Really, that's funny. Then why did they put the fucking word regulated right in the amendment? Quote, a well-regulated militia. Number three, at the time they were dealing with the British and Native Americans and bears. So there was a better argument that you absolutely needed guns. Okay, number four, the most advanced weaponry of the time was a musket. It took like 17 minutes to reload that son of a bitch. Okay? So if you're willing to be literal about the amendment, which the conservatives like to pretend like they do believe in a literal interpretation, right? If you want to be literal about it, you have a right to a musket if you're in a militia. Okay, so go ahead. Go have at it, guys. Everybody go grab a musket and join a militia. Then we'll shut the fuck up. Now, also, everybody in the country, in one way or another, is in favor of gun control. It's just that we all draw the line in different areas. So, for example, nobody says that you have a right to a nuke, or a chemical weapon, or a biological weapon, or Scud missiles, or tanks, or F-22s, and I could go on and on and on. Everybody, I mean, maybe there's, 7 dudes in the country who are legitimately stupid enough to say, no, I think you should have a right to a nuke. I think you should have a right to a rocket launcher or a grenade launcher, an RPG. Okay, well, you're a fucking idiot if you think that. We all know society wouldn't function well if everybody had access to those things. So we're all in favor of it. It's just a matter of where you draw the line. And might I add that even Antonin Scalia, who was one of the most conservative justices arguably in American history, he ruled that Congress can regulate guns, and they can do background checks if they want, and they can even go as far as banning assault weapons if they want. So even the most conservative justice on the court goes, of course they can, regulate guns today. They didn't have this stuff back when the founders were around. Now, the last thing, and this is the most important thing. So what is the Second Amendment? What it really about? So what's it really about if it's not that old saying that everybody brings up that most people believe? Most people believe that we need guns as a last line of defense against tyranny, man. And again, that's not just the conservatives that believe that. A lot of liberals have bought into that idea, that was the idea behind the Second Amendment. It's not. So are you ready for the real history of it? We've discussed this before, but it's mind-blowing every time we bring it up. So the Second Amendment, it had two purposes. Well, actually, it largely ended up with one, but it was founded on one idea, and it moved on to mean another idea in the eyes of the founders. So the original intent was about standing armies. Thomas Jefferson knew, when he looked at history, that standing armies were always a threat to a government being stable, because standing armies had the potential to overthrow a government, and it oftentimes happened throughout history. So basically what they wanted is, when you have the soldiers, if they're not overseas fighting, when they come back home, they have to, by law, disband. The army can't stay together when they're home. So they have to, by law, disband. And when they do disband, they're allowed to form militias in their states, and they can keep weapons. Okay? So that was the first idea. The idea was that they didn't want the federal government to get overthrown. Not that they did. Not that the idea was they need guns in case they need to overthrow us. The idea was they didn't want them to get overthrown, so they made the army disband, and they were allowed to form militias and have weapons. That was what it was originally for. Then, this is amazing, we had Patrick Henry, okay, from Virginia, one of the founding fathers. He was the largest slave owner in the state of Virginia. He wrote about this, and also George Mason, same thing, from Virginia, founding father, slave owner. They went back and forth with Thomas Jefferson, and they were talking about how, look, we're afraid that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which of course is the General Welfare Clause, they were afraid that that could be interpreted to free the slaves, okay? And they were afraid about that, because Virginia is a slave state, okay? In fact, the majority of the population in Virginia were slaves. So they were scared to death of Article 1, Section 8 eventually being used to overturn slavery, which would mean that they would lose all their slaves, right? So what happened is, this is amazing, they came to an agreement, and this was the purpose of the Second Amendment. The idea was, well, look, you're allowed to, in Virginia, because Virginia was apprehensive to join the country, they said, look, you guys join the country, and here's what we'll give you. We will allow you to form militias, and you can patrol the border in Virginia to try to make sure that slaves don't escape, and you can be armed. So when they talk about a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, what they're saying is, you can do slave patrols to make sure that the slaves in Virginia don't escape north for freedom. So the main purpose of the Second Amendment, not according to me, according to the Founding Fathers, you can read speeches from Patrick Henry and George Mason on this, okay? The purpose of the amendment was to stop slaves from escaping north in Virginia. So the militias they're talking about in the Second Amendment, slave patrols. So the Second Amendment is actually for preserving slavery. Well, technically, if you want to be specific, it's also about standing armies. So it's about standing armies and preserving slavery. That is the actual purpose of the Second Amendment. Anybody who tells you it's to stop the government from getting too strong so we could overthrow them, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That's not in the debates. Nobody mentions that in the debates among the Founding Fathers. Again, the only things brought up, standing armies and protecting slavery. That's it. So you don't have an individual right to bear arms. Now look, do I want to confiscate all guns and all weapons? No, I don't. I'm not in favor of banning guns. I'm not. I'm just simply not. You know, but what am I in favor of? Look, I want a universal background check. You shouldn't be allowed to get a gun if you're a former felon, if you're a suspected terrorist, if you're schizophrenic, if you have severe depression. I mean, just a list of things that you're disqualified from getting a gun legally in those circumstances. A universal background check, a database along with that. You ban high-capacity magazines. You possibly ban assault weapons, okay? You can still have your pistols, you can still have your rifles, you can still have your shotguns. We're still going to have gun deaths in the U.S. higher than other modern nations, but maybe we'll chip away from that 32,000 number. Maybe we could get down to, 4,000 gun deaths, which would be fantastic. We would throw a parade if we only had 4,000 gun deaths. The bottom line is, the debate today is gun anarchists in America who say, don't do anything, we need more guns even though everybody's dying, okay? Gun anarchists versus sane people who are arguing for moderate reforms. That's what I'm doing. Nobody wants to ban guns. People just want to tweak around the edges to make sure that we're not living in an insane place like Somalia, right? But along with that, you need to keep in mind, man, the history of the Second Amendment and what it was actually about.